Hello, this is Jordan, and this is my 2014 Vermont 100 race report. This past summer, I was fortunate to be part of the Grand Slam of Ultra Running race series, and it is four of the oldest 100-mile races in the U.S., and the Vermont 100 is the second leg of that. There's roughly 300 runners that participate in this, and it's really unique race in that there's a 100 mile, 100K, and a number of additional horse races that go on throughout the event. And so you share the course with not only a lot of runners but some horse riders as well. As I mentioned, this is a qualifier or the part of the Grand Slam series, but it's also a qualifier for the Western States 100. And I almost missed the registration for the Vermont just because of the popularity of the race and the number of people trying to sign up to qualify or to use this race as a qualifier for Western states. And another component to the registration process is the service requirement. And so even though if you do register and you get on a waiting list, one thing to note is that a lot of people don't get that service requirement in or are too late in getting it in. So even if you miss the initial registration and you're on the wait list, make sure to get that service requirement in, because a lot of times you can uh, uh, move up that list really quickly because a lot of people just don't, for whatever reason, get that service requirement in. The course for the Vermont 100 is mostly gravel roads, a lot of jeep trails. There's some single track, some kind of cross-country ski type of terrain, but overall it's a very fast course. For the most part, it is fairly runnable as far as the terrain goes. It's a very up and down course, and so there's not a lot of really truly flat area, but you kind of go up and down and kind of roller coaster up and down on a lot of gravel roads most of the time. But again, it's a very runnable course, and the 2014 was a new course record, and the course record being 14:47:35. So it's a very fast course, and if you are able to manage some of the heat and some of the different elements as far as that goes, you can really have a really great race. The Vermont 100 doesn't really put out a course map, and a couple of reasons for this is that the course does change from year to year. In a lot of the areas the areas where the course is on private land. It's very backcountry of Vermont, which is very gorgeous, but you're going through people's private properties, through some of their pastures, down roads and in their driveways sometimes. And so the course or the director and the organizers really have to get a lot of permission for the race to be put on every year. So they don't really advertise the course map. So if you're looking and trying to find it, you're probably not going to find a really good course map out there. And the ones that you do find, they might change. The course might change. So as you can see, you kind of meander up and down and around kind of the backcountry of Vermont, which again is just really scenic, very gorgeous. But despite having really no prior direction, before arriving on the race day, the course is really well marked. And so even though as a runner and then your crew, you have to come and get really directions so your crew can follow you and find you to different spots, and they have to register their car as well so that they're allowed to go on some of this private land and really be able to get to some of the checkpoints and aid stations on the course. But my crew never had any issues finding the different spots. Another note that the race does let you know about is GPS really doesn't work very well out there, and a lot of times it will be incorrect as to what road you're supposed to go down to. So do make sure you get the directions from the race if you are crewing or pacing. And in when you're arriving at the start finish and registration, because our GPS, both on our phone and kind of a GPS device, work to some degree, but a lot of times weren't very accurate. So make sure you do follow the directions. On the other side, when you're running out on the course, or if you're pacing a runner, the course is extremely well marked. They have a marker really every quarter mile, and a lot of times what they'll use is a plastic or paper plate with an arrow on it, or a C, and they will mark, or they'll have an arrow, a single arrow, before the turn. They'll have a double arrow at the actual turn, and then usually, shortly after, or within about a quarter mile of that turn, they'll have a plate with a C on it, and this is kind of a confidence marker. So despite not really knowing where you're going prior to the start of the race, the course is really well marked. So at no point did I feel that I didn't know where I was going, or there was any question as to where to turn, or what road or what trail to go on. So from that standpoint, extremely well marked, and so getting lost or knowing where to go was never an issue. Here's a readout of the aid stations for the race, and as you can see, there's a lot of aid stations. There's the ones in green here are the ones your crew has access to, and as you can see, the type, that third column to the right, is the type of aid station, and there's a lot of unmanned aid stations there that are designated with that U. And if you take a look at the next column, you can see the distance between each aid station is, a lot of times it's right around 3 miles. And so one nice thing about the course is that every 3 miles you're going to find either a manned or unmanned aid station. So that's really nice as far as not having to carry a lot of fluids with you. One thing I went back and forth on was, do I carry 2 handhelds, or do I carry a lot of fluid with me so I don't have to stop and fill up a lot, or because there's a shorter distance between most of these aid stations, I really could probably carry one handheld or a minimal amount of fluid with me and just fill up a little more frequently. I did decide to carry 2 handhelds and not have to fill up so much, which I think ultimately worked well for me. But you can kind of have a lot of flexibility because there's a lot of unmanned aid stations, or a lot of aid stations in general. The unmanned aid stations are very basic. A lot of times it's just a table with a couple coolers and some, kind of larger coolers with water. Usually there's one with some type of a, sports drink. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of some snack, like some chips or something, or gummy bears, and some of them even have some 2 liters with some Coke or soda, but most of them are very kind of minimal, and a couple of them, depends on the time of day and where you're at, will have a cooler with some ice, but they are fairly basic, but that's kind of what to expect when you come upon some of these unmanned aid stations. Here is my crew, and one of my friends on the right there in the banana costume, Wes, actually somewhat recently moved out to the area, roughly 2 hours or so from the course, and so he was actually going to try to get in and run the race, but with the popularity of the race, he didn't make the registration, unfortunately. But it worked out well for me because he offered to crew and pace for me. It really just made the whole experience a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. And Wes was just amazing as far as being able to come pick me up from the airport. We stayed at his house, and we drove out to the race. And again, he was there to crew and pace, and just made the whole experience a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. Wes has quite a bit of experience running himself, so it's always great to have someone that's been out there, have done a 100-mile race before, has done trail races before, and so it's just always just more comforting to have someone that's out there really kind of helping support you and then pace you towards the latter part of those races to kind of help you just from a mental standpoint. So it's great having him out there, and Dimitri on the left. Is a friend of Wes's that I really didn't meet or didn't know prior to the race, and he was curious about the event and wanted to come out, and ended up running over 20 miles with me. And I think that was the longest he had run in a couple years. So hopefully he didn't kill himself while he was out there. But it was just, again, it was just great being able to have those guys out there pacing and crewing for me. They really just made the experience just a whole lot easier and a whole lot better. So here is a shot of the pre-race meeting, and as you can see, there's a lot of people there. It really is a world-class event. They have so many more. There's so many more runners and participants at the race. In the Midwest, there's just not as big or as large of a race as what's going on here, but they did a great job. It's really well organized, and there's just a great kind of feel to not only the other racers and runners and crew members out there, but a lot of the volunteers there are really, they're local people that live there, and whether they're runners or not, they come up and they, every year they volunteer at the race. And so it was really cool, very unique, or very welcoming atmosphere just to the area and to the race overall. So had a lot of fun and got to meet and talk with a lot of runners out there. They do have a great pre-race meal, and they feed you really well prior to the race. And again, it's just a great little add-on to be able to kind of sit, eat some really good food, and talk to some fellow racers and people that are associated with the race. As I mentioned, the Vermont 100 is the second race of the 4 races for the Grand Slam, and here are the remaining participants for the start of the race. As you can see, there's quite a few of us left. I think there's 24 starters for the race, and again, it was fun to see some of them again and check and see how everyone finished and did as far as with with Western States a couple weeks prior to this race, and how everyone's doing kind of heading into the race. And got to run with a couple fellow Grand Slammers throughout the race, and again, it was just fun to kind of see some of those guys again. Game plan as far as going into the race, really didn't do a whole lot of homework on the race in general. I really had a lot of focus on Western States going into the Grand Slam series, and really just wanted to kind of hold on for the other 3 races, so to speak. So wanted to manage the heat out there because it does get pretty warm out there, and it is a little more humid versus out at Western States or some of the other races. So wanted to make sure I was managing the heat. Wanted to stay, pretty conservative, because I didn't really want to, or wanted to make sure that I kept the overall goal of finishing the Grand Slam series in mind. So, individually how I did in this race wasn't all that much or all that important, other than getting across the finish line and kind of getting the buckle, so to speak. And then also wanted to really just be mindful with any potential injuries. I did run really hard and pushed quite a bit in Western States, and so didn't have any major issues there, but was obviously a little beat up and didn't want to aggravate anything that would be a problem for finishing this race or the 2 remaining races in the series. Some of the gear and things that I used, basically, like I mentioned, I used 2 handhelds for most of the race, so I carried roughly 20 ounces of fluid with me. I used water in one, and then I had a kind of a sports drink in the other. I did use a buff around my neck and put ice in there once it got really warm, and again, that really kind of helped with managing some of the heat. Thankfully, the temperatures never got too high. It was probably in the upper 70s or so at the hotter part of the day, which was fairly warm just with some of the humidity out in that area. But overall, it didn't get really too warm, thankfully. I was using the Huma gels. One thing that's a little different is Vermont did, at least for this year or 2014, didn't have any gels at the aid stations. So one thing I quickly realized is that if I was going to use gels for the race, that I'd have to rely just on the ones that I had. And thankfully, I had plenty, and my crew was great about restocking me, so wasn't too much of an issue. But I think one thing to note, if that's something you rely on as far as gels and different things from the race and the aid stations, that at least the year in 2014 they didn't use gels. They had some chia bars, and they had plenty of sports drinks, water. They had sodas, a lot of things to snack on, and some of the aid stations did a great job of making soup and different things, but they didn't have any type of gel that in any of the aid stations that I was at. And then I did use the Hoka Conquest shoes. They are actually kind of a road shoe, but they really worked well both out at Western States for the second half of the race, and in Vermont here too. As I mentioned, the course is a lot of gravel road and Jeep trail, so there's not a whole lot of technical running, and so the Hoka's really worked really well to not only kind of provide a little bit of that extra cushion, but because the course was very runnable, this is again a road version of the Hoka, and I had no problem with that. For the start of the race, you start early in the morning, and there's again 300 other runners that are starting out with you. So you head out of this big clearing pasture area and head down some Jeep trail, or head down the road and into a kind of a Jeep trail. And there's just a ton of runners, and so that's one thing that's a little different in that there's always really someone running with you, and there's you don't you're not really isolated a whole lot. And then, as I mentioned, there's other races that are going on during the race. The start of the race, I felt really strong. Again, it was a lot of gravel roads, which just actually suited me quite well, just because my legs were kind of banged up from some of the technical parts of Western States. So being able to get out and actually kind of run were just actually suited me really well. It didn't kind of aggravate anything that I might have kind of tweaked out at Western States. So the first marathon, or 26.2 miles of the race, I ran pretty fast. I ran about 4 hours and 22 minutes. So I didn't really notice or didn't feel like I was pushing a whole lot. So thankfully it didn't turn into any issues as far as going out too fast. But that was a really fast start. Looking back at it, but thankfully I didn't pay for it too bad later on in the race. Here's just a couple photos I've just grabbed as far as from the internet. I did take my camera and didn't have a whole lot. Wes grabbed a couple photos of me, but didn't really get any images from the course. But it really is a gorgeous area. You're really in the kind of backcountry of Vermont, and you're going down all these little gravel roads and through some of the little towns and areas, and it just really is a gorgeous area. There's a lot of really very cool houses, and there are a lot of horses and kind of small just little areas around the on the course that are just very scenic, and so it's really kind of relaxing, almost and peaceful course. So it really is a gorgeous area that I probably wouldn't necessarily go or get out to normally if I wasn't doing the race. There was a lot of kind of, this is very typical, there's a lot of these stone walls along the course, and a lot of little creeks and different things you're kind of running, again, through some of these kind of old countryside roads, and just was very, just a gorgeous area to run down, and you can see why people are kind of active in the area, whether it's out running or horse riding or whatnot. At one point, as I mentioned, the course is really well marked, but I did take a slight wrong turn. I missed the turn, and I only made it about 10 feet, and I realized that I had missed the turn, and so I turned around and went back, and there's a runner behind me that was just about to kind of yell at me and let me know I was going down the wrong way. And so when I got back on the path, we started running, and we chatted a little bit and whatnot as you kind of meet up with someone. And after about 20 seconds, I realized that this is Chris from the Sawtooth 100 that's in the north of Duluth, Minnesota, which was uh, which I ran in 2011, and I actually ran the last 60 miles with him. And I do remember, obviously, we talked and we bonded quite a bit over the last 60 miles of the race. And I do recall him being from kind of the Boston area, which is only probably about 2.5 hours from the race. And um, it was just a kind of a chance meeting out in the race, and so we chatted for probably about another hour or so as we kind of ran with each other. Eventually, we kind of got separated again, but it was just really fun to get a chance to meet Chris again and kind of see how he's doing, and he's still doing quite a bit of running. He does a lot of hiking as well, and so it was fun to catch up with him and to see him again. So it's kind of a surprise meeting out there, and so it's always kind of fun to see someone that you got to meet at a prior race. And even though the sport is growing really fast, it's still a really small, close-knit community. So it's fun to get to see some of those people that might not ever meet again. At roughly probably the I would say maybe 40-mile mark, or closer to the halfway mark, I did start getting some issues with my IT band, and thankfully didn't have too much problems in at Western States prior to the race, but I could feel it really kind of got beat up, and so wanted to hopefully be conservative with it during Vermont, but I could tell it was really starting to flare up, and it was really starting to slow me down quite a bit. Just had a really sharp pain right in kind of the knee area of my IT band, and it's kind of been a problem, or has been a problem in the past as well. So I did take a little bit of ibuprofen, which getting some of my blood tests back from Western States had a really high kind of levels that really are not very conducive to taking ibuprofen, because it kind of continue to have some of those issues with your kidney issues with taking ibuprofen. So I didn't really want to take any if I felt I didn't need to, but took, I think, just 2 ibuprofen, and really did actually help quite a bit to alleviate some of that pain, and I was able to kind of maintain a pretty solid pace overall. But something I still kind of went back and forth with, and really tried to avoid using if at all possible. Also, as I mentioned, there are 2 horse races that are going on during the race. So one of the kind of unique things was you'd see quite a few riders back and forth going, kind of passing you, or sometimes you'll be passing them as well. And it is really cool to get to be very up close and personal with a lot of these riders and their horses. They are doing kind of a whole different type of racing, but it's kind of unique to get to kind of share the course with some of the riders that are out there. And as I mentioned, the course overall is really fairly open, and there's again a lot of gravel roads, and you always have someone that you're running with, whether it is a rider or another runner. And I got to meet Conrado here, who's pictured there, and we kind of were really going back and forth and running, with each other, or right ahead or right behind each other, almost the entire race, and got to spend a lot of time with him out there, and got to chat and get to know him quite a bit over the course of the race. And we ended up actually finishing, right together, and didn't know each other at all prior to the race, but as anyone that knows that you can, when you're spending a lot of time out in the trail with someone, you get to know them, get to be friends pretty quickly. So it was great getting to run and get to meet him. He was actually doing the next 2 next races, Leadville and Wasatch as well. So we got to see each other quite a bit over the summer. As far as the volunteers and the aid stations, again, they're really well stocked. The volunteers were really great. All of the manned aid stations had a ton of volunteers who did a great job and were just super helpful. As I mentioned, there isn't any gels in the aid stations for at least in 2014, but really that was the only kind of and not really an issue, but only difference I'd say I would note. But overall, again, they're great volunteers, really well stocked. There's all the kind of usual food and drinks and everything there, and it was really kind of almost like a family type of atmosphere. So thanks again for all the volunteers and everyone that was helping to coordinate the race. So I did finish. I got my belt buckle, as you can see up on the screen there, and we do get a nice little medal as well. And so I made it through at least half of the Grand Slam, and this was a really a fun race. For me, it was nice because it was a flatter course, so you did get to do quite a bit of running, and so it really suited a little bit more my type of running, as opposed to some of the kind of more mountain races that'll be later on in the summer. But it was a lot of fun, and it's just a really great event that I probably would have not ever participated in, if I hadn't been part of the series. But I'm really glad that I got to go out there and see some of the Vermont countryside and get to meet a lot of great people. So my results, I finished in 19 hours and 10 minutes and 50 seconds. As I mentioned, I finished right with Conrado, and was good enough for 24th place overall, and had a roughly about 11 and a half minute pace throughout the whole race. My fastest mile was mile 9. I laid down a blazing 8:02 at mile 9. My slowest mile was at mile 88, and it was just under 21 minutes. So most of, again, the course is really runnable, so it is a fairly quick course, and I was able to do well. And again, it really kind of suited me a little bit more so than some of the more technical and more hilly courses out there. So that's my race report. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully it's useful as far as if you're thinking about running the Vermont 100. I think it is a great race. Definitely would encourage anyone in the area, or if they're interested in it, to register. It does fill up fast, so make sure you're on top of that, and make sure you get your service requirement in. But really a really well run race, and just a great atmosphere, and a fun course, especially if you kind of like the more flatter courses out there. So hopefully again you enjoyed the race report. Definitely follow me on Twitter, YouTube. I'll have this video posted there, and then my blog at jordanhamlin.com. So